If you're moving to Guam and looking to rent an apartment or a condo or a single family home, I'm going to walk you through the basic rental process and also share my top tips to help you feel more prepared and confident in securing a place. Now, obviously, step one would be finding a place that you like, right? And some people will choose to start looking online, while others might want to work with a realtor for this. Now, we realtors will set up our clients with a client portal in the Guam MLS, and this will basically narrow down your search to what you're specifically looking for as far as how many bedrooms, how much square footage of the living area, does it have a garage, does it allow pets, basic preferences like that. And once that portal is set up, our clients will receive a list of properties that currently match their search criteria, and they'll also get notifications of new listings that go up every day. Step two is narrowing down your top picks. I usually recommend getting a list of maybe your top 8 to 10 places. And once I've coordinated with the listing agents for those, then I set up a whole schedule of touring. This could either be a full day or half of a day, going to see homes, but I try not to overwhelm people. Maybe, 5 to 6 places per day would be my limit. But at this point in the process, you're basically able to see each house, kind of walk the grounds, test out the appliances, get a general feel of the neighborhood, and basically visualize if it would suit your living style. Once you have picked out the spot that you want, then it's time to move to step 3, which is paperwork. Now, for a tenant, the most that you would have to worry about is filling out a tenant application, which is something that the realtor provides, as well as providing a copy of your ID. And we usually recommend a driver's license or passport. Depending on the brokerage that listed the property, they may require additional documentation to go along with your tenant application, such as a verification of employment or your last 2 pay stubs. If you're military, they might ask for a copy of your LES or a copy of your orders, but this will always vary. And while you're working on the tenant application packet, your realtor will compile the lease agreement, or in this case, it would be called a lease offer. This will outline the terms of your lease, the start date, the price that you are offering, how long of a lease it would be, and then of course other necessary documents like disclosures, addendums, and clauses that are meant to protect both sides. Moving on to step 4, your realtor will then submit your tenant application packet and the lease offer to the listing agent so that they can review with the landlord. This could take anywhere from 1 to 2 days, and of course this could also depend on if there is more than one offer on the table. If there are other people who are also trying to rent this place, then the landlord will obviously want to review each offer with their listing agent and compare the terms of each. For me personally, if I've submitted a lease offer for my tenant client, I usually give the listing agent 24 to 36 hours before I check in with them if they haven't said anything already to me first. I just try to be mindful that there are a lot of factors involved, such as, for example, the landlord might work a full-time job, so they have a small window where they can call or meet with their listing agent to go over the offer. The landlord could live stateside, so there could be a time difference that they're working around. Also, that listing agent has multiple clients, not just that one property, not just that one landlord. So I try to just be mindful of that. And while the waiting game sucks, I know, I just tell my clients to just be patient, just to practice patience. And if I haven't updated you on anything, it's really because I have no information from the other side yet. In step 5, this is if and when the landlord accepts the lease offer. Now, this step is going to differ whether you are a civilian or military. So we'll cover the civilian version first because that process is a little more streamlined. After the landlord signs the lease contract, the first thing that you will worry about is getting your move-in funds prepared. And your move-in funds consist of your security deposit and your prorated rent. The security deposit is something that is collected at the beginning of every lease and then returned to you at the end of your lease, minus any deductions due to damage or tenant negligence to the property. Any damage to the premises that may have been caused by you or a visitor or a pet, either way, it's still on you as your name is on that lease, and your security deposit can and may be used to cover those damages. So that's just gonna be a side tip to try to protect that security deposit, is do your best to keep the property in the condition it was in when you first rented it. Along with the security deposit, I also mentioned prorated rent, and that is going to be based off of your move-in date. So for example, if you moved in on July 15 and there's 31 days in July, you're counting 17 days worth of rent that will be owed. And this number/amount will differ depending on what price you're also renting the property at, but don't worry, that's where your realtor comes in. We'll do the math for you. Delivering your move-in funds will vary brokerage to brokerage. Most will accept a cashier's check. Some also accept a money order. Some can do bank-to-bank transfer or direct deposit. So it's just good to check with your realtor so that they can get that information for you ahead of time. So that's move-in funds covered. The second part is getting the utilities transferred into your name. The landlord will provide a utility transfer authorization, which will list their accounts for Guam Power, Guam Water, and Guam Solid Waste. And you will go into these utility offices to schedule the transfers. I'll go into a little more detail about utility transfers in a sec, but I did want to switch back and cover what happens if you are a military tenant. For military members renting in Guam, there is an extra hurdle that we have to overcome, and that is the housing inspection. So let's go back to the step where the landlord accepts the lease. You will then take that lease along with validation documents and the business license that's provided by the landlord, and you will meet with your housing office. A counselor will review your lease with you, make sure there's nothing missing, and then they will schedule their housing inspection. Now here's where the tricky part comes in, because you literally cannot do anything until that housing inspection passes. As much as I'd like to say, go get your move-in funds ready or go do utility transfers, get it done ahead of time, again, we literally can't do anything until that inspection passes. So of course, if the inspection passes on day one, then you will proceed with getting your move-in funds ready as well as initiating the utility transfers. Now let's say the inspection doesn't pass that first day. So a couple of things need to happen. First, housing will schedule a re-inspection, and this gets coordinated with the landlord so that the landlord can address any concerns or make any repairs that were needed, which basically caused the inspection to fail. And the re-inspection is so that it can officially pass. The second thing is that now your move-in date has to change from what we initially proposed in the lease. So a change in your move-in date will change the amount of prorated rent, and it will also change the date that you transfer your utilities, because no one in their right mind is going to transfer the utilities earlier than you move in. But here is something that I advise to make things a little easier for that step, and that is just to have the utility applications filled out already. You can leave the account numbers blank, you can leave the start date blank, and basically just fill those in once you have a confirmed move-in date. Just smart to have something done ahead of time. Finally, once you have your move-in funds ready and you have the utility transfers successfully done, then we move on to step 6, which is move-in day. The listing agent or property manager who will be present on move-in day will need those utility transfer confirmations and the move-in funds in order to hand over the keys. You are also conducting a move-in inspection on move-in day, and this is just basically notating the property in its as-is condition. So you will go around and test things like making sure hot water comes out of all faucets and all bathtubs, showers, and whatnot. You will test some of the appliances. You'll notate tiny details or discrepancies like chipped paint or smudge marks on the wall, cracked tiles, basically anything that was already existing before you lived on the property. On or before move-in day, you will be provided with the landlord information in order to make your rental payments moving forward. And you will also be provided a local point of contact, phone number and email, so that if any issues were to arise around the house, around the property, that you know who to contact immediately. Once the move-in inspection is complete and the move-in funds have been verified or delivered, the utility transfer confirmations have also been received, then keys are handed over to you and you can start making it home. Now, after helping several clients go through the rental process, I've definitely taken note of things that I think are important to know, just helpful tips to make the process a little bit easier. So tip number 1 would be, don't look at homes too early. If you do know that you're moving to Guam, but that's not for another 5 to 6 months, I would say that's definitely too early to get your heart set on something. It's good to get an idea of what kind of properties are available here on Guam, but just don't fall in love too early, because that place will likely get rented out before you even get here. For tip number 2, I would say make your wish list, but definitely stay flexible. It's good to know what your needs or must-haves are in a home And also, what are some things that are like, it'd be nice to have, but if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. Do make a list of things that you would like to have in a home, like whether that be a fully fenced yard, whether it's furnished versus unfurnished. At the same time, you don't want to be too strict or detailed on your list, which is why I say remain flexible, because if you have a list in a home where it has to check all 27 boxes, like it has to have a 2-car garage, and it has to have a dishwasher, and it has to get mail delivery service, and it has to have a water softener, and it has to be powered by solar, and the list goes on. You see where I'm going with this? Because at the end of the day, you are limiting your choices as to what could potentially be available, and it's just going to be very hard to find something that's going to meet all those requirements. Tip 3 is going to be budget accordingly. Now, remember when I mentioned your move-in funds, and that consists of your security deposit and your prorated rent? Again, that will depend on what price you're renting the house for. For example, if the place you're renting is $2,000 a month, you're gonna wanna have your security deposit, $2,000, and then a little extra, ready to go. And when I say ready to go, I mean easily accessible. This is just because your move-in funds are required up front. It's not something that you can pay later. They need it before you can even get the keys to the place. If you are military, while you do receive overseas housing allowance for the duration of your lease, it's best to just still have that amount, your security deposit and maybe 1 month's rent, easily accessible, just in case that housing allowance process takes a little longer than you expect. To be safe, just have the amount of your security deposit and the amount of 1 month's rent in your checking or savings account that you can withdraw easily. The other part that I would say to have ready is, even though you can use a credit card for this part, it would be when you are setting up your utilities. Specifically for Guam Power, they will charge a deposit, which is based upon how many rooms, meaning bedrooms and living room. Because I believe when we did our utility setup, we have 3 bedrooms and then the living room, so they counted it as 4 rooms total. So our deposit was somewhere between $400 to $500. However, this deposit after 12 months of service can be returned to you like a security deposit, or it can be applied to your next power bill. For Guam Water, the setup fee is $52. So, it's not as crazy as the $400 or $500 charge, but it's just something to know. And then setting up your trash bins with Guam Solid Waste, that doesn't require any deposit. But again, just setting up your utilities, it's good to have, maybe like $500 to $550 to float. And while we're on the subject of budget, that brings me to tip number 4, which is shop within your budget. While you're looking at different properties, if you know what your final budget is, stick to it. While some landlords might be a little flexible with the price, like if you were going to have a longer lease, longer than 1 year, I would still say don't look too far over. Like if your budget is $2,500, the most I would even recommend looking is 26, 26, maybe 2650, because you don't want to go looking at places that are listed at 3,000 and hoping that they bring it down to 25. This will either insult the property owner, or they will just bypass it because that's not the price they're looking for, and they'll then you've kind of wasted time putting in a lease offer for that. So it's just something to be aware of. Tip number 5 is going to revert back to the subject of utility transfers, and that's where I say get the applications filled out ahead of time. I know I mentioned it earlier, but it's just something I want to emphasize because it's just gonna make the process for utility transfers go a lot faster, as opposed to you showing up to the offices and then you're having to spend time filling out the applications. Again, it's just one less thing for you to worry about. For my clients, I do send those utility applications early on in the process so they can already be getting it done. And then my last tip is going to be, if you do have this opportunity, to try driving around while you're looking at different homes on the MLS or in your client portal. While you may not be able to see the inside of the house yet until your realtor sets up a showing, it's still a good idea to go drive to these properties, these potential properties, and just to get a feel of the area, because while something can look like the perfect fit on the MLS, you could show up to the house and be like, oh, this is actually farther from work than I want it to be. or this, is on a busy road and I kind of want to be on a quieter street. Or you get there and you're like, in this neighborhood, the houses are a little too close to each other and I prefer more privacy. So I know everybody is different, so it is helpful to get a feel of the area and make sure it's what you want. So if you do arrive to Guam and you're staying in a B&B or hotel or any temporary lodging, really take the time to just drive around so you can familiarize yourself with the different areas. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful and provided you a little more insight and comfort if you're moving to Guam and looking to rent a place here. Thank you so much for watching to the end, and I will see you in the next video. Adios!